Hi, I'm Roger Young, a senior financial planner with T. Rowe Price. I'm still working from home, as you can see, like I suspect a lot of you are. We are getting a lot of questions from our clients during this crisis, and we want to make sure that we answer them to help keep you on track financially. Our topic today is help for people who may be a little ways away from retirement. We know that that's a challenging time, and you might be juggling other priorities, like helping your kids and saving for college, and even helping your parents. So we hope that this is relevant for you, and we encourage you to pass this along to other people who might benefit from the information. I appreciate that people have a lot of anxiety right now about their finances, both their income potentially, as well as their investments. I know it can be hard to just sit back and stay the course, like a lot of us give you advice to do. There's a temptation to do something. And I know even myself, I'm asking myself whether it's appropriate to make some adjustments. The challenge, though, is that it's very hard to predict what's going to happen in the short term. So even for a professional investor, short-term movements are hard to predict. So if you're thinking about making a bold move, like dramatically reducing your stock exposure, I want you to think about the fact that there are two ways that you can get tripped up, a couple of different risks. One risk is you can mistime the exit from the market. Second is you can mistime the re-entry back into the market eventually, or not get back in. And both of those can be very harmful to you long term. In this particular downturn, things have been moving very quickly. I don't think there were many people who expected such a steep decline from the peak of the market that we saw down to starting a bear market back in February and March. And similarly, I don't think a lot of people expected how quickly that bounce back would be that we saw into mid-April. So there have been a lot of things moving around. And again, it's very difficult to predict the short-term movements in the market. So since we can't really do a good job of predicting the short-term moves, we think the best strategy for you is to think long-term. And long-term, it is generally proven beneficial to stay invested in stocks at an appropriate level for your position. So fortunately, if you have a long time horizon towards retirement or other goals, and you managed your allocation pretty carefully prior to the crisis, you're in a pretty good position to weather the volatility. So in general, we think, yes, staying the course is still pretty good advice. Remember, though, that staying the course doesn't mean you never make any changes or any adjustments. For example, we did consistently say during the bull market that you want to make sure that you're rebalancing your portfolio occasionally, and that helps you manage the risk. So when stocks were doing really well, you would occasionally reduce your stocks and move those assets into something more conservative. Now, if you've rebalanced over the last decade, that did reduce your gains a bit, as opposed to if you just let all of that exposure to stocks grow. However, it would have prepared you better for this downturn, and it would have reduced your losses so far in this downturn. The hope, though, is it gave you some confidence and some ability emotionally to avoid rash decisions in the downturn. Hopefully, it helped you avoid making a decision to sell a large amount at the bottom or near the bottom. Since you have a long time horizon, however, you rebalance when markets go up. You also can rebalance when markets go down, and you can bring your equity exposure back up to where you want it. So I know that that's tough to do in the middle of a downturn, to rebalance and actually add to stocks during a tough time. But it can make some sense to do that at some point when the volatility has subsided a little bit, and there's at least a little bit more certainty about what's happening with the economy. And again, that's very tough to do now when we have lots of questions, both health-wise and economically. If you did feel like you got your exposure to stocks a little bit high prior to this downturn, maybe you didn't do a lot of rebalancing, I'd say the key is to avoid acting out of fear right now. So there'll be time when things settle down a little bit to reevaluate your asset allocation. You would have benefited on the way up, and now you want to take some time after things settle down a little bit to consider making adjustments based again on your time horizon and your risk tolerance, which you might reevaluate as well. The time will be after the volatility subsides a little bit. As you think about making adjustments, it might help you to consider what our investment team is doing. As the markets dropped, some of our investment professionals made what they call disciplined rebalancing moves. So in this particular downturn, that meant largely selling treasury bonds that have done particularly well and buying shares of stocks at lower prices that they think are well positioned to recover well in the economic recovery. They're thinking long term. Our investment professionals also continue to publish their insights on how to prepare for a post-crisis world. Now, if you're invested in one of our multi-asset portfolios, like a target retirement date fund, we're basically making those adjustments for you. If you're doing it on your own or with the help of an advisor, you certainly can continue to monitor things and make adjustments. We would just suggest that you don't obsess over it on a daily basis. Another thing to consider if you're thinking about possibly doing adjustments is some research recently done by our investment team. They looked at a set of downturns over the years, significant downturns, with the thought of whether it was beneficial during those downturns to make an adjustment out of bonds and into stocks. And what they found was yes. And it didn't even require that you really perfectly time the bottom of the stock market. If you were, say, a month early or a month late, it was still beneficial in those cases they looked at for the portfolio to make a shift from stocks into bonds. So that's important as you think about things like rebalancing. Again, adjustments rather than large, bold moves during a time of uncertainty. So we know these are challenging times for a lot of people. And if you're doing okay, really the best thing you can do is take care of the important things, your health, your family, and from a financial standpoint, continue to do what you can to make contributions to your workplace retirement plan or invest in an IRA. Those should help you in the long term. And again, remember that your reaction doesn't need to be perfect. It's okay to ignore the pundits who try and predict whether we've hit bottom or whether a rally is sustainable. Don't beat yourself up over missing an opportunity or not doing things perfectly. If you do the big things right, investing, thinking long term, that should position you with pretty good odds of success. A lot of people have been asking about strategies for saving for college. And we know for a lot of people in this position, that's a much nearer term goal than saving for retirement. So I can certainly relate to concerns over the drops in the market recently. I personally have 2 kids who will be going to college next year, so I know that firsthand. I'd like to offer a little bit of reassurance, though. If you're in an enrollment-based portfolio in your 529 account, remember that your portfolio is intended to balance the risks against potential returns in a way that's appropriate for your time horizon. So that doesn't mean it can't go down in value, but it does mean that if you're close to your college years for your kids, that a fairly small portion of that is actually invested in stocks at this stage. So when you hear about results and declines in a big stock index like the Dow Jones Industrial Market or the S&P 500, keep in mind that those results are not indicative of what's happening in your portfolio that has a mix of stocks and bonds. And remember, if you're using one of the plans managed by T. Rowe Price, our firm has a long history of weathering volatile markets, and our team is actively managing those portfolios. That includes the glide paths that decline from a more growth-oriented portfolio when the kids are young towards a more conservative portfolio closer to college. So that team has been doing it since 2001, and they've lived through and adjusted to downturns like the 2008-2009 downturn. So as with retirement savings, we would say it's still best to follow a long-term strategy, to stay the course with your strategy. As an example, if you're a little farther from college, say you have an 8-year-old who's probably, say, 10 years or so away from going to college, remember that that's actually a reasonably long time frame when you're thinking about stocks. So over historical data, very few times has a broad stock index declined in value over a 10-year period. So the fact that you have a mix of stocks and bonds gives you even hopefully a little more comfort in staying the course. If you're facing tuition payments and other educational expenses this year, that could potentially present more of a challenge for you, especially if you've been a little on the aggressive side with your investments. So in that situation, you could consider putting money that will be needed for expenses in the short term, say in the next year, into an investment option that is intended to preserve your principal. Now, keep in mind, you only get to make 2 investment strategy changes in a 529 account each year. So you want to use those opportunities wisely. This highlights another benefit of the enrollment-based portfolios. So in those cases, we're making the adjustments to the portfolios, and those don't count toward your limit of 2 investment strategy changes per year. Now, another way you could make changes to your allocation without using one of those 2 allowed changes is by adjusting how you're putting new money into a 529 account. So you might put that into a different portfolio than the one you have been using. For example, in preparation for expenses that are coming up soon, you could direct new contributions to an investment option that's intended to preserve your principal, like I mentioned a moment ago. We're also getting questions from clients about refunds that they're getting from colleges. So again, this is a subject of interest to me personally. I have a student who's now home from college unexpectedly. If you paid for college expenses with a 529 and now you've gotten a refund on that, you want to be careful that that money you took out of the 529 account isn't taxed or penalized. So it's not hard to do, but you do need to pay attention to the details. The way to avoid the unfortunate consequences is to recontribute that refund into your 529 account. So in the past, you would have had 60 days from the day that you get a refund to put that money back into your 529 account to avoid taxes and penalties. Now, in this situation, because of the crisis, Congress and the IRS have given you an extension on that. So if that 60 days would have expired sometime in the time frame of April 1st to July 15th, you basically get until the end of that period. You get until July 15th to make that recontribution. So as an example, if you get a refund from a college for room and board in April or in May or early May, 60 days would have been before July 15th, but you'll get until July 15th. So you get a little bit more leeway on that. Finally, for parents, I want to address the concerns of people who are facing financial challenges, financial stress as related to the coronavirus crisis. Ordinarily, we encourage people to continue investing in their college savings plans. We recognize that may not be feasible right now. So our attitude, honestly, is do what you can. If you're able to make contributions, that's great. If not, we certainly understand. Now, in terms of taking money out of a 529 plan for non-education expenses, remember that there are potentially taxes and penalties with that. So we would encourage you to look for other ways that wouldn't encounter penalties. So you want to look for sources like government assistance, unemployment benefits if you're unemployed, family and friends potentially, possibly taking money out of a home equity line of credit if you have one. If you've been directly affected by the coronavirus itself, you could even consider what's called a coronavirus-related distribution out of a retirement account. Those would be ways to avoid penalties. So overall, though, we do want to stress that whatever you need, we're here to support you and we'll help you get through this crisis as best we can. We know that supporting needs of both your kids and your parents can be a big issue for a lot of people. And we've published some articles on how to best juggle those priorities. In addition to those articles, we have some steps that you might consider right now in light of this particular crisis. So thinking about your parents, it's always important to understand their plans for healthcare decisions and their estate plans, know where their documents are. It can be difficult to start those conversations at any time, but this crisis could potentially act as a catalyst to start having those discussions and learn, what your parents' situation is and be in a good position to support them. As for having young children at home, I definitely feel for you right now. I'm thankful my kids are a little bit older. I don't have to add the job of homeschooler to my responsibilities right now, like a lot of you do. So while it's not our place to give you, parental advice necessarily, we do have a lot of experience in helping families to educate their kids, to teach lessons about money. For over 10 years, we've been doing a survey called Parents, Kids, and Money. One thing we've consistently learned doing that survey is that kids who have regular money conversation with their parents tend to have better financial habits. And that can last a long time in terms of setting them up for success. So in this crisis, your kids are probably hearing a lot of things out there. They're hearing about the economy. They're hearing about people losing jobs. They're hearing about financial stress. They might be hearing you talk about financial stress. So we'd encourage you, don't shy away from those topics. Take advantage of this situation and have those conversations with your kids. Be upfront if you have challenges to the extent your kids are ready for those conversations. I think in the long term, they'll appreciate that you've been honest with them and that you cared enough to have those conversations and tell them the truth. In terms of tips that you can use to help you with these conversations, we have a website called Money Confident Kids. It has a lot of resources. It has activities and lessons and even games that parents and educators can use, or possibly in your case, a parent who's suddenly become more of an educator. There are also other resources out there in addition to our own. Nonprofits like Junior Achievement has materials. You can look for news sources. You can go to your library and hopefully they have online resources. So a lot of ways that you can have these conversations and try and make the best of the situation. So finally, we'd like to give you a general reminder that you want to also make sure you're taking care of your own financial needs first. That puts you in a good position to be able to help your kids and be able to help your parents if necessary. So you might think about steps like getting a little organized in terms of your papers and your plans, possibly revisiting your budget. You might find that you don't miss some things that you've had to cut during this time as much as you thought you would. So take care of yourself, take care of the people that you love, and hopefully, it would be great if you can make some positives out of a difficult situation that we find ourselves in this crisis. We hope you found this video helpful. We're here for you, and we'd love to hear from you. T. Rowe Price is committed to helping you through this crisis, so please reach out with any questions you may have. We hope you and your family stay healthy. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your confidence in T. Rowe Price.